This is a Willets Point Shea Stadium bound 7 express train. The next and last stop is Willets Point, Shea Stadium.
Oh, yes, it is the Subway to Shea podcast. Anthony Rivera here with you, talking about all the news and happenings surrounding that team from Queens, the New York Mets. Episode 169 from the Subway to Shea studios in my office. Another week, another Mets morning episode here. I feel like we should do these in the morning during the off season, especially during football season. Sundays are usually the best time for me to do the podcast. So I think we are going to stick with this time frame, at least through the hot stove and through the off season. Obviously, if there's any breaking news, we'll come with you and do a live stream at that. Anything breaking, obviously that's going to be, what we, tend to change things around. But shout out, 39 people already in the room. I know it's not for me. It's for my guest, the man, the myth, the legend himself, who's about to come on here. But appreciate everyone for being on here. Duran Rivera, Shea is on here. Armand, Jeff Cohen. We got Ibby in the chat. Also, Ibby is our guest, so you can check him out as well. G Money Stacks in the house. Patty and NYC up in here. Appreciate every single one of you that is here. A lot to talk about today. There's going to be some rumors that we're talking about. There's going to be a lot of information that we're going to throw your way. The GM meetings happened with David Stearns. So let's get right into it. And I got my guest today. I talked about him a little bit earlier. It is Matt Ibby Ibanez from Till Mets Do Us Part. It's so hard to get Ibby on the show with his time frame. Our time frames just don't match. But getting you on this morning, happy to have you on and happy to talk Mets baseball with you through the podcast. We always are chatting with each other, but it's happy to have you on here on the Subway to Shea podcast, my friend. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and thank you so much for having me on. Shout out to everyone in the chat so far. And cut it out. We all know that people are coming to see you. They're not coming to see me. Come on now. But all in all, I'm doing well. I'm always excited to give you the time and find the time. I know it's tough because, whether it's work schedules or it's the kids or whatever, believe me, I want to do these things a lot more often than I actually could. But I'm glad that I'm here this morning to give you some time. We're going to do this for an hour or so. And I'm very pumped up. There's a lot going on with our Mets, so I'm excited to talk to you about them. I know we were joking yesterday saying how I was on the show around this exact time last year. I saw the update on Facebook as well, that I was on the show around this time last year. Granted, I was on at work. Now I'm in my brick house, as you can see. So, anyway, I'm just excited to be here to talk Mets. And like you said, there's a lot going on, a lot to get into. So let's do it. Let's have some fun.
Yeah, last year we were talking about who was going to be the manager of the New York Mets and what they were going to do in the offseason. The offseason last year and how they were going to construct this team has now totally flipped, done a big 180, and it's totally changed into what we're going to see this offseason. We're going to get into a lot of that stuff. You can make sure you see the handle right there. So follow him at @poison_Ibby, as well as at Till Mets Do Us Part. You can follow the Subway to Shea podcast, as you see on the screen, on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. You can follow me at Ant Rivera 86 and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you're following Till Mets Do Us Part on YouTube. All the things. And I see already people in the chat wanting to debunk some of the rumors here. We'll definitely get to Willy Adames later on in the show for sure. But we got to start off with the man himself, Juan Soto. Steve Cohen is going to visit Juan Soto and Scott Boras this week, as reported by Mike Puma of the New York Post in Southern California at the Boras complex. Now, we talk about Juan Soto, but obviously that's not going to be the only people that he's interested in looking at and probably going to be talking to Boras about, because Boras has a lot of clients that I think we are all interested in, talking about here. So, last time the Mets did this, it was for Yamamoto when he went to eventually going to the Dodgers there and not coming to the Mets here. But the Mets did the whole thing, the whole courting of Yamamoto. They went to Japan a couple times. He came here. He had dinner with the Cohens at Cohen's house. And, I expect the same kind of courting to go along with Juan Soto here. And, you look at what's going to happen here. Look at the Ohtani deal that happened last year for the Dodgers, 10 years, $700 million, a lot of that deferred here. What are you looking for when it comes to contract, I don't think this gets to $7 million. Maybe it's an AAV thing that they make it higher than Ohtani's, but I don't think we get to $700 million because he is not the same type of player
Right.
that Ohtani is.
Right.
Great offensive player, probably one of the best, top 3, I would say, in the league at offense. But the defense, man, we're talking about kind of Starling Marte-esque type defending. Would be in right field.
Yeah.
So, where are you looking at when it comes to contract talks? If the Mets were to sign Juan Soto, high AV, high years, do they get over 700 mil? I don't think they do. I think they are able to find some comparable price. And the fact that, he wants to win is what was talked about with Scott Boras saying that he really wants to win. That's what this will come down to. I think we're going to get a decent good price out of him. I don't think it's as what people expect and what's been talked about.
It's something that we as fans are having a hard time wrapping our heads around because it's really an unheard of situation. This is going to be a lot different than what happened with Manny Machado and Bryce Harper, even though they both came out when they were 26. But I said on our show last week that I felt that for some reason at that time period when it came to Harper and Machado, the owners really tried to put an axe on the idea of having players making ridiculous contracts. And a lot has changed in those handful of years since then. But when it comes to Soto, I'm with you. I don't think it's going to hit the 7s. I know people automatically assume it's going to. I actually have a bet right now going on with my cousin who I told him my idea was, at the time when I said this, I was like, I'm thinking like high 5s. I said high 5s, 12, 13 years. That's where I was at that moment. And he goes, nope. He goes, it's going to be 701, 701, 701, 701. And I go, I really don't think it's going to get there. To the points that you were just making. It's the Ohtani contract. Number one, he's a two-way player. Number two, the deferrals take away the real value of the contract. Nobody in their right mind, it's such a weird situation, is going to defer $680 million. Like, that's not heard of. I've been saying, and I'm going to stick with this, I believe that Scott Boras is angry that he does not have the highest ranked player in terms of years and money on the market. I think he's pissed off that belongs to Ohtani and his agent. He wants that. He's going to get that. Okay, now he's going to have that because the actual real value is going to end up being on Soto, because I don't think this contract is going to have a lot of deferrals. I really don't. And I think in the end, you're going to get him topping Ohtani in terms of yearly, and he's going to top him in terms of overall present day value. So he's not going to get 700. Okay. But if it hits high 5s and it enters the 6s with minimal deferred money, then it's going to end up topping the whatever it is, like the 470 million real day value of Ohtani's contract. I think that's where we're looking. Now, I also believe, and we'll talk about our Mets and everyone else that's involved in a moment, but I also believe that the number will climb. So if I'm saying high 5s, low 6s, I wouldn't be shocked if that number climbed into mid 6s, high 6s, as a way to close the deal. So there is still room for them to go higher and make more. I think that's very possible because I think our team, our Mets, are going to do anything they can to land him. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. But I'm at the point where it's going to end up being, 13, 14 years in total, minimal deferrals to add more to the real value. And he's going to top Ohtani in terms of the yearly. So to give you an example, 14 years at, let's say, 48 million a year. I think that equates to 624. I'm not good at math. I think that's what it is. But that's kind of where I am right now in terms of the picture of the contract of what it might actually be.
Yeah, I agree. I think the AAV will be high because Boras, like you said, wants to get it to that point and wants to have the highest paid player in baseball. I'm looking at some of the comments here. Patty makes a good comment. Whatever the money is, or it is, what I want is team control with 5-year opt-outs. I think there will be towards the end probably some type of team control type thing, but there will be player options as well and stuff like that involved with this. This type of contract takes a while to get done. And, you look at what Ohtani did. there's going to be no deferments. Like, we can get that. He is a
Right.
different type of player. He brings a different type of aura to the team and money to the team with, his endorsements and the Japanese market. So it's a whole lot different when you talk about a guy like Ohtani. So it's going to be a lot different there. Armand saying Boris and Soto will have the highest AAV, which we agree with. And, when Cohen goes out there and tries to, woo him, we all know that this is the top priority of the team. And I got to wonder, I don't know where it is for Cohen, right? Because Yamamoto was the top priority last offseason, but there was a limit that they were not going to go over to get Yamamoto. They did 325. The Dodgers matched. They could have went a couple of million over to try to seal the deal. And I don't know if they said, hey, if we go a couple million over, will you sign here? And he's like, nah, I still want to go to the Dodgers anyway. We don't know if that's how that went down. But if Cohen really wants Soto, to me, and I'll preface this by saying Hal Steinbrenner also will meet with Soto in about a week and a half. That's from John Heyman of the New York Post. If Cohen wants Soto that bad and wants him to be a part of this team, to me, he has to go over there and say, what do I got to do? What's the number to get you done and to not have you speak with other teams? I know you want to speak with other teams. Well, what is the number that it'll take to get this done a little bit quicker?
Yeah, and I think if that's the route that Cohen decided to go because he says, I don't care, I'll pay the number right now just to avoid all this nonsense and get it done with so we can continue with our offseason. Obviously, with Boris as your agent, that number's going to really that's a case. I think that it would be 701. Like that in that sense, I think that's what would end up having to happen, to say you can't talk to anyone else, because we know Boris's game. He's always going to be the one who likes to use leverage and other teams, and they're going to use the Dodgers as a stalking horse to try to, oh my God, if he goes there, so add more money, add another year or whatever. But I just think that it's to a point where I look at everything. And I've been saying that I feel that this has been years in the making, even before Stearns. It's always felt that Juan Soto was the guy in terms of who you spend the money on, the years that you offer, the crazy contract, the way that they've built this team over the last handful of years on shorter term deals, higher AAVs, that money going out the window, the timing, everything just seems proper. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to get him. The Yankees could still get him, and I think it's still, it is going to come down to either of the New York teams. But I still think that the Mets are very well positioned to go all in, and really, I feel like the limit doesn't exist. And I really think that, and the point I was making on our show last week was, if you come in and you put pressure right away, even if it's not to the point where it's like, don't talk to anyone else, but if it was, we're going to say, okay, we're going to open up right now. No matter what, we're giving you $600 million. Like, if you start there and say, I'm going to give you $600 million regardless, that's our starting point. I think that establishes that you are willing to obviously go higher if you're going to start at 600. That number eliminates almost everybody, I believe, from the conversation except the Yanks. So that puts the pressure on them to say, okay, if they're going to offer 6, that means, are we willing to match that? Are we willing to go a little bit over that? And then Cohen would then be able to say, look, I said I was starting at 6, and I was starting at 6. Like, we'll go to 650. We'll go to 6. Like, there is ways that I think that if he truly wants the most money, I don't think the Mets will be denied. Like, I really don't think that there's going to be a stopping point like there was with Yamamoto. This is a 26-year-old hitter. Different trajectory than what Yamamoto was. Yes, pitchers aren't, known to be hitting the market as an ace-like player from Japan at 25. So that's why he got the contract that he did, which is unheard of. And those are contracts that we're not even going to, I don't even think like Corbin Burns is going to land a contract like that. So it's crazy because of the timing with age. This is perfect storm. 26-year-old hitter, top hitter, has been one of the top hitters, if not the best hitter in baseball since the age of 19. It's unheard of. I don't think that if it's truly about money and opportunity, I don't think the Mets will be denied. So if they truly, that's why I keep on saying, I don't think that the number exists in terms of them stopping like they did with Yamamoto. It's like 325. That's where we're going to go. Dodgers match. Okay, I'm going to LA. This point, it's like, we'll offer you 600. Yeah, but the Yanks offered 615. Yeah, but we're going to offer you 635. And then I think they'll just keep going until he eventually says yes. That's what I think.
And Shea brings up a good point because he said the limit when talking about Yamamoto, the limit must have been because he was unproven in Major League Baseball, which is true. You got Soto is proven and he's in his prime right now, only at 25. We don't even know if there's another level that we can get from Soto, only being 25 here. So there are just many opportunities this offseason for this Mets team. And I saw that someone in the chat, John doesn't think that the Mets are going to get Soto, even if they reach 600 million, which could be the case. I mean, it all depends on what Soto is feeling for what he wants, right? I mean, obviously, no one can outbid the Mets, right? That's a given, right? No one is going to outbid the Mets unless Cohen puts a stop on where he wants to bid and how far he wants to go. But no one has more money in Major League Baseball than Steve Cohen does. So that's a big positive that we have. Now, he could want to take a lesser deal and stay with the Yankees. Maybe he feels more comfortable there. But anything is possible this offseason. And let's say this is not going to be doom and gloom if the Mets don't get Soto, because a lot of people were saying, even if you pay him all this money, he's primarily just that offensive player. He doesn't bring that defense. Obviously, right field at Citi Field is not going to be fun for him to play around at either. But the Mets have other options and other things they can go to and pivot, and that's why I like and trust David Stearns in charge along with Cohen, because I'm pretty sure they have plan A, B, C, D ready. Whereas in previous iterations of the hierarchy in this thing, they were always after that one player. They weren't prepared to do other things. I feel like this Mets team will be able to pivot in other areas as well. I look at some of the chat here. G Money Stacks. It wasn't G Money Stacks. I think it was actually Stanley Babbage. I'll get to G Money Stacks comment a little later. But Stanley Babbage saying, hi, Ant and Ibby. Do the Mets sign both Soto and Alonzo? Goes in with the same thing as Jeff Cohen. Can the agent bundle Soto and Alonzo, deliver 2 free agents at the same time? I am still under the assumption, and this is just my opinion, that if the Mets get Juan Soto, that they are also going to get Pete Alonso. I feel like this is going to be, and I know you guys mentioned the comment on your show as well, this is to me going to be like when the Yankees did their 2009 run and went crazy in the offseason. This is a totally different season now for the New York Mets, considering that they went to the National League Championship Series. So the goal is to get right back to the National League Championship Series and hopefully get to the World Series. And to compete with the Dodgers, you're going to have to do these 2 moves to me. You're going to have to bring back Alonzo. You're going to have to get Juan Soto. I don't know what the deals are going to cost, but to me, I think that both of those guys have to come to Citi Field if this team is going to, make it to the World Series.
Yeah, I think that I'm with you in terms of the competing aspect. And it's not so much, to me, it's not even so much as getting back to the NLCS again this upcoming year. I think it's just about, like what we've talked about all the time, and that's that sustainability. It's about looking at the scope of the National League and saying, what do we have to do in order to compete? So when you look out there and you see how well equipped and how well built the Dodgers are, you're like, well, that team's going to be there for the next 5, 7, maybe 10 years. Like, how do we compete with that? The Phils are going to continue to keep churning and spending to try to get better. Yes, the Mets beat them this year, but they're not going anywhere. It's not going to make the NL East that much easier. The Braves are going to get healthy. You look at the Braves, and they are set for years to come with the contracts that they have for their young players. So it's like you look out and you go, okay, the team that we have, and you can say, yes, we love Francisco Lindor. Yes, we love what Mark Vientos provided. Yes, we love the upside of Francisco Alvarez. Yes, we can't wait to see what could happen with some of the kids that might come up for this team, whether it's the Jet Williams or the Drew Gilberts or whomever else. If Luis Angel Acuna can provide, what have you. But you still have to look at it and go, this team needs more in order to compete. So that's why I am so adamant about Juan Soto, because I think to have a player like that, that puts you already into the discussion of being able to compete with said teams. Yes, I am fully aware that this team still needs pitching, and I believe, yes, you have to get pitching. But I'm with you in terms of the spending. I think it always comes down to people saying, "Oh, everyone thinks the Mets fans are saying, they're going to spend. You're going to have a $30 million player at every position." And I'm a person who said Mets fans have to realize that you're not going to. But it's about the player. It's about a certain type of player that you do it for. So when I see a Juan Soto, that makes sense in terms of spending big to try and win, not only today, but tomorrow and years to come. When I see someone like we'll talk about, the likes of a Roki Sasaki, if that's possible, a 23-year-old, makes sense with the window and the build. Pete, to an extent, still makes sense depending on the years that you're working with, because if you think Juan Soto is going to end up at first base at some point or what have you, and utilizing of the DH, how many years is Pete going to really get on the open market? But it's about trying to figure out how can we compete, not only next year, but the handful of years that come in terms of everyone else. And I think that this Mets team is on the right path, but you still have to go out there and spend. And I think that they're going to be willing to spend within this market, as well as make trades within this market to get younger players that allows them to compete not only in a short-term window, but a long-term window for years to come.
Yeah. I've been thinking all offseason. I was like, I think it's, for me, it's Soto, Alonzo, a starting pitcher is probably the big parts of the offseason, and then a trade possibly for a starting pitcher as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then they fill out the bullpen like Stearns always fills out the bullpen and how he can, looking for value in some of these minor league players and some of these players that are on waivers, and seeing if the pitching and Jeremy Hefner, the pitching lab and Jeremy Hefner can quite possibly turn these guys into something. I think we see something like that this offseason. Obviously, they got to fill the bench. I would hope they would bring back an Iglesias on some type of deal, as well as a Jesse Winker. So, yeah, the Mets definitely need to take this step to another level when it comes to putting together a team that is to compete with the Dodgers, that is to compete with the Braves, who, like you said, are going to be healthy again. The Phillies are going to look to retool. They probably want revenge after what we did to them in the NLDS. So that's another team you got to look out for. The Padres are always around. I'm pretty sure some team from the Central, whether it's the Cardinals or the Cubs or let me not leave out Milwaukee, who we beat as well. They're probably going to look to add to theirs as well. And, Keith from Shea and Sons podcast, make sure you're subscribing to them as well, saying the super team era is now in Major League Baseball. And it certainly does feel like that when you look at what the Dodgers put together and how they won the World Series this year. It definitely does feel something like that. But I think to a certain extent, too, it's a lot different in baseball when you're able to spend so much money and figure out a way and defer contracts and try to get under the luxury tax. There's just certain things to allow these teams to be able to do this. And I hope that the Mets catch on to the trend that the Dodgers did. I don't think it happens with Juan Soto, but maybe there are other players that are willing. The big thing for the Mets was this offseason getting a winning season to get them to a point where, hey, you know what? I think I might want to go to Queens. I think I might want to play for the Mets. And I think that they did that offseason, and that's huge. You look at now the transition to Roki Sasaki, because you mentioned him. So we're going to talk about him. He was posted by the Chiba Marines. Jeff Passan had posted that from ESPN. His career in the NPB, 29-15 with a 2.10 ERA, 505 strikeouts in 394 and 2/3 innings pitched. Last season, he was 10-5 with a 2.35 ERA, and he had 129 strikeouts and 111 innings pitched. Now, to preface that, he only made 18 starts because he had a torn oblique and some right arm soreness. So that's something to be aware of and to keep note of. His best pitch is the splitter. He's only 23 years old. I want to quote this because it came from Jeff Passan in his article, and I don't know much about international signing, so I want to make sure I say this as clear as possible. This came from Jeff Passan. He says, when it comes to these type of signings here, the top bonus pools are around $7.5 million. and the bottom around 5.1 million. And I think the Mets are somewhere in between that when it comes to international spending. Now you can trade for international bonus pool money and free up some space there. Or, as Will Salmon posted, December 15th is the last day to post a player from the NPB. And is the last time for international signing period. That's when it ends. But on January 15th, he could be reposted. And that's when teams have their full bonus pool money, come back to them. So maybe they wait until January 15th to do a signing, because then he'll be able to get more money, because right now he's only able to sign a minor league deal. This is not like getting Yamamoto here.
Right.
So this one helps the Mets, right? Because they're not going to have to spend a lot of money on a starting pitcher who has this much potential. I don't know too much about Sasaki, if he's better than a Yamamoto at pitching. So I don't know what it is. He's still young. He's still only 23 years old, but he's got a lot to prove. His manager, former Met Masato Yoshii, who also went through that same thing when he came to us, goes, "It's a big blow for the team. Of course, however, I've played in America myself, so I understand how he feels. I also understand his desire to take on the challenge now that he's young. To be honest, he still has a lot to learn." And this is coming from his manager. So that's something to keep note of when it comes to signing him. But I think he'll be able to hone himself and improve his level in America. When I see him pitch for the first time in the bullpen at the Ichigajima camp in 2020, it was the biggest shock I've seen since Hideo Nomo. I want him to prove that over there and to do his best. So, like I said, he can only sign a minor league contract since he's under 25. And like I said, this is something that helps the Mets because they won't have to do a posting fee. Like for Yamamoto, the posting fee alone, and that's not even including the contract, was about $50 million. That's a lot of money to have to give up for a starting pitcher, especially international pitcher. But I won't be shocked, obviously, if he signs with the Dodgers either. Like this is perfect for them, the way that this contract is structured, because they won't be, spending a lot of their money either. And that's just another person to add to the Ohtani and Yamamoto tree that they have there, and that Japanese influence, that international influence that they have out there in the West Coast. So I can see him going there as well. You look at other teams that could possibly be in on him. Padres, because they got Yu Darvish. The Cubs have Suzuki and Imanaga. The Red Sox have Yoshida. They could be in on this as well. And obviously the Giants and the Yankees round that out to me. I think the Mets should be all in, especially with how this deal could be structured. What are your thoughts on Sasaki?
From the stuff that I've read so far, whether it's from, I read a lot when it comes to like dynasty and fantasy aspects, and I've read everyone that has a better scope of the MPB and what he is. And I've read a lot in terms of people thinking that at the age he is probably he could be better than what everyone thinks Yamamoto can be. I think, what is he, 6'6"? His stuff is similar, if not better. He's got a very, very high ceiling. So I understand the hype around him, especially coming over at 23. And the biggest thing is this. No matter what, and I know people in the chat were saying that there's basically a 45-day window to get this done, otherwise he goes back. I think the biggest thing here is to understand that money doesn't matter. Like everyone's talking about, the international money, and this is what teams have, and this and that. It's like, if this guy cared about the money, he would wait until he was 25. But clearly he wants to come here. So this is really all about preference. This is all about recruitment. This is all about pitching yourself. So really, it comes down to, what do you want to do? Really. And then the interesting thing about the entire thing is how, when you read about Japanese players, and a lot of them say, and you hear a lot about, a lot of Japanese players don't like to play the second, or even in this case, the third, if he went to, say, the Dodgers for Ohtani and Yamamoto. It's like a lot of them like to carve their own path. A lot of them like to be seen as the superior, as the top. Now that gets thrown out the window a little bit because Yamamoto did choose Ohtani and the Dodgers. But that in itself is interesting. Will Sam puts out the article last night on The Athletic saying how, of the teams on the East Coast, the Mets do have a very strong shot. Granted, everyone's still going to say the West Coast favors because of the travel and everything and what the Dodgers have done within that market so far. So, yes, they are going to constantly be seen as the favorite. But the Mets still have a shot. They have connections within Japan. They do have the good connection and the good vibes that they put out there when it came to how they courted and went after Yamamoto last year. Yes, they came up short, but it's not as if they were, they did exactly what they were supposed to do. Like, they offered the most. They pushed the Dodgers to spend an extra $50 to $65 million in order to land him. So it's not like the Mets were not, really within that hunt. But I really think that they have a shot, but it really comes down to what this player truly wants. If he wants to come over, I think he already has an idea as to where he wants to go because he already knows he's not going to be making much money. So this is very similar to what Ohtani had to go through when he first came here. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to be Ohtani. I'm not saying that at all, but clearly he wants to get here. And that was a different time. Ohtani ends up going to the Angels. People were kind of, iffy on him when he first came over. He goes to the Angels, becomes what he is, and the rest is history. But I think it's going to be very interesting, the recruitment process. We know that teams have gone over there. We know David Stearns has gone to Japan and watched him and what have you. And that's going to continue in terms of this whole recruiting process. But I really think he has an idea. If I was to put odds on it, obviously I'm going to say that the Dodgers are a heavy favorite, as they should be. But then I come back to the whole thing. Does it matter? Does he want to carve his own path? Would he rather have being seen as the third, not as much on him, easier way to transition, especially when you're not making as much, so it allows you to relax a little bit more, and then you can create that and make more money in the process along the way. Like, I don't know. I can't be in the guy's head, but a lot of those questions are interesting, and I still think the Dodgers have a very strong inside track, but it's going to be fascinating to watch regardless.
Well, Rosie K says sports writers are treating Sasaki to the Dodgers as a foregone conclusion. I think that's just comes with, everything that is in baseball, right? Everyone wants to go to the Dodgers. The Mets are in on everyone because the Mets have the most money. We're gonna hear all of these things throughout the offseason. Now, the one team that I think that could probably challenge these two is definitely the Padres, because I think there's some type of relationship between him and Hugh Darvish. I think I read that. I don't know if it was in the Salmon article or if it was in the article with Jeff Passan. Could have been both that talked about it when I read it last night. But don't count out the Padres as well. They are, still looking to get to that goal as well of trying to make it to the World Series. They had that 2-1 series lead against the Dodgers, and they were just that close from getting to the NLCS. So, I'm pretty sure they'll be in on it too. Salmon also posted in the article, I think you mentioned this, but I just want to read it at verbatim here. He says, Sasaki will likely prioritize stability, lifestyle, comfort, and according to league sources, a team's track record and player development, like you mentioned earlier. And I just want to bring that back up too, because you mentioned the courting of Yamamoto and what the Mets did to try to get him there. Now, David Stearns traveled in September to watch Sasaki pitch and to kind of open up that dialogue there. We got to remember as well with the Mets is the way they've handled Kodai Senga. Now, I know he was hurt this season, but the way they brought him to New York and how he was able to adjust and really become a part of that family of this team, sometimes when these guys come across, doesn't matter who it is, they just don't fit the team. But you look at Kodai Senga, and he just became a Met, and that was great to see. That's something to keep an eye on. Jonathan here is saying, "Rest in peace to Sasaki's UCL in advance." But that's with all pitchers, right?
That's
like
everyone.
You sign Corbin Burns, and that could be the same thing. You trade for Garrett Crochet, that could be the same possibility. So, when I look at what could be with Sasaki and the money that it goes into that international pool money, Shea brought up a good point. If you sign Roki, your pool money is basically over or next to done, and major prospects who once may have handshaking deals may be back in the pool. I don't know. I think for Sasaki, I think I would risk that this year. I mean, how many players from the international pool have come up and become major leaguers outside of, Francisco Alvarez, right? He's He's probably the biggest one that for the Mets. But if you have an opportunity to get this pitcher at a cheaper deal and have him be in the major leagues, this season, whereas if you signing these international, from the Caribbean, like it might take for them a while to get here. But if you have the opportunity to get Sasaki and he can jump to the major leagues, I think that's a risk I might take. And I don't say that lightly because I wasn't sure about Yamamoto and going after him right away for all the money that they were going to pay for him.
Yeah, I think something like that is interesting to watch unfold because I believe the Mets did give out $5 million, which, if someone in the chat can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think his name is Elian Pena, who's a shortstop. I think that's the top guy that the Mets attacked in the international market. And obviously many people that are more within the know than myself, people like Daniel Wexler on Twitter, were saying how the Mets are not going to pull back that $5 million on that player because obviously they gave him that money with high regard because that might be the highest I've ever gone on a player within that market. So I'm not sure if it's going to be that. Like I said, I think this really comes down to the overall recruitment and not so much the money. So I think that if they do attack this player, if they do attack Sasaki, I think it's going to be with the intent of, hey, this is all we can offer, but in terms of money, but this is what we're going to offer you in terms of a team, of a franchise, and moving forward, how we can take care of you, what we think we can, help you improve on, and how we think that there are avenues for you to make more money in the process along the way. I think that that's what you're looking at more so than the Mets actually giving up money or giving back players, if you will, to try and compete over, a couple $1 million that other teams with higher international pool money have.
Shea saying that there's a good article out there on Baseball America about Roki Sasaki and the team's international bonus pool. So if you want to go check that out, you can check that out as well. The Passan article was great, and Will Salmon also does great work as well when it comes to, covering the New York Mets, which brings me to the next topic of discussion. And I think G Money Stacks has these two comments that, pretty much detail what we're going to talk about here. How do you know which sources and reports to believe when it comes to the New York Mets and the players? And that goes along with his next point was we got to debunk these rumors, alerts in the air with the whole Willy Adames, because those two comments go hand in hand here. And we're going to get into Willy Adames here because the Mets have shown interest in shortstop Willy Adames. It first came out from everyone's calling him the barber in our chat, but Mike Rodriguez was the first to report on it, MLB Insider. And then Michael Mayer posted it as well, also giving credit to him. So, I usually don't like this, whoever comes up first with these rumors. I like to wait. I need to see multiple sources say it. And then the final touch for me is Jeff Passan, is Will Salmon. There are some, obviously you can look into John Heyman and as well as Sherman as well. But to me, it's Passan is the final goal, as well as Will Salmon. Passan on a national level, Will Salmon for the Mets are the guys that you really want to listen to when it comes to these rumors. Now, I only want to get into Willy Adames here because it's good to talk about, right? I mean, what Willy Adames would bring to this team and what would happen with him coming here, a lot of things would have to be in play here. Now, he's willing to switch positions, as was stated in the article from Michael Mayer, and for the right team and for the right offer. He would have no choice to switch positions when it comes to the New York Mets because we have a shortstop in Francisco Lindor. Now, he's only played 10 games at second base and 10 games at third base in his entire career. That's including the minor leagues. Last season, he had a .251 batting average, 32 homers, 112 RBIs, 21 stolen bases, a .794 OPS. He's only 29 years old. We know that David Stearns traded for him when he was in Milwaukee. If a deal like this happens, it probably does spell the end for Alonzo if they sign Juan Soto as well. We're probably looking at the end of Pete Alonso, or maybe, Mark Vientos goes to first base and something like that. But I don't know if that's the move for me. You're looking at a guy that's going to switch positions. Now, some people transition and it works well. but some people does. Javi Baez, it worked very well when he went to second base to team up with Lindor here. Some people it doesn't work out for. The one great thing about Adames that Pete Alonso lacked in this offseason was hitting with runners in scoring position. He hits very well with runners in scoring position. He hits very well with the bases loaded. But, if he was the only person that I would have to worry about when it comes to defense, I would say fine, that's okay. But you put him at third base, you have to worry if he's not going to be able to transition. Then you put Mark Vientos at first base, who played very well at third base, and now you're asking him to play first, which is not the most difficult position when it comes to Major League Baseball. But, some people have a hard time making that transition. And then you have, if you sign Juan Soto in right field, you have another person that's a liability when it comes to defense. And all David Stearns has done since coming here is preach run prevention and defense. So I don't know how true these rumors are. Maybe there is interest. Maybe the Mets are just covering all bases. Hey, we may be interested in having you. Would you consider moving? Maybe there would have been talks, because the Mets are going to be in on everybody, and they have to have multiple options and multiple plans when it comes to this. So I wouldn't go too crazy about this. I don't know if this is a definite that this would happen, but it's definitely something to look into for sure.
Yeah, and I think you're right in terms of covering your bases and just talking to one of the really good hitters that are on the market. And I've been saying that I don't think that the Mets are 100% in on signing someone like Willy Adames for everything that you just pointed out in terms of movement of positions and defense and logjam of prospects and middle infielders and all that stuff. But the one thing I will say that makes it interesting is that, let's say on the off chance that the Mets did sign Willy Adames, right? The only thing I can really think of in terms of movement for a team is, number one, it's getting a really good hitter on your team and figuring out the rest later, okay? But number two, it's also, if the Mets signed Willy Adames, what would you think? Let me ask you real quick. What would you think happens to Pete Alonso? Do you think he stays or do you think he goes?
If they repeat that first part, if
they sign Willy Adames today, just as an example, what do you think happens to Pete Alonso?
I think that depends on Soto.
Let's say the Mets, crazy scenario, Adames signs, Mets also sign Soto. What happens to Pete Alonso?
I think Pete Alonso goes.
Okay, so Pete Alonso then goes. Now, the reason why I agree with that to an extent is, if he goes, he's going to be angry. Boris is going to be upset because, in my opinion, I think that if the Mets signed a Willy Adames, it tanks the Pete Alonso market. Because if you remove the Mets from the Pete Alonso market, that his stock and everyone offering money goes down. Because, like, well, if the Mets aren't in, I don't got to offer this much money. And I don't think Pete's going to get that much money to begin with. I've been on record saying I think he's going to be 125, 130 if he's lucky. We're talking 4, maybe 5 years. That's where I think it is. So if the Mets eliminated themselves from that market, if they did sign Adames, I think he comes down even further. Now, the other reason I say that is because that would then allow the Mets to potentially get him at an even cheaper number, because everyone else comes in lower, so they can offer what they've probably been offering and he might accept to stay. But I don't think, all things considered, I don't think he is going to come here. I think the idea is to lower the Pete, to make it seem as though if the Mets go elsewhere, Pete's screwed, and you don't have to offer as much, so it kind of brings down his price a little bit. That's kind of where I am on the entire thing. But I think Willy Adames is a damn good player. I was advocating to trade for Willy Adames last offseason when we weren't sure what was going on when it came to third base. And obviously we saw what ended up happening during the season here. But I was advocating in the offseason to trade for Willy Adames because I thought the Brewers, shows how much I know, I didn't think the Brewers were going to be that good last year, but they ended up having a great season. He had an incredible year. So I respect Adames as a player. I think he fits for any team, really, any team that's trying to win, because I think he's a damn good hitter. But in terms of this team, in terms of the other players that are available, I understand checking in, but ultimately I don't think it is the move that this team is going to make. I agree that they can call and talk. I don't agree with Mike the Barber, who's saying that, 7 years and 160 was offered. That I do not believe. No.
Yeah, and I don't want to kill his credibility or whatever. I don't know. I'm not an insider or whatever. I don't know what it takes to be an insider. I'm just here to give my reactions. But after seeing his post on Adames, I was like, oh, let me wait and see what else comes out. Still nothing. And then he posts about Soto and Soto signing, which everyone's posting about, right? Coming to the Mets. And once he said that Alex Cohen would, want him to be the captain, and that would be that's when I said, you know what? I'm going to put this guy to the side, because that's something we have not seen, and I don't believe for one bit. When you look at the relationship that Cohen's have with Francisco Lindor and the type of leader he's been being here for so long. So you just got to be aware, make sure you're reading the fine line of what everyone's writing. And like I said, keep tabs on guys like Jeff Passan. He's for MLB just entirely. And Will Salmon also posts great stuff. And, those are the guys that you really got to look into when it comes to this, and make sure there's multiple reports. Everyone wants to be first, and that's a problem. That's a problem now in baseball and in all sports. They all want to be first. No one wants to be right.
It's fun. It's always fun. Like what we do when we do our shows, and when we collab and we're tweeting and we're constantly looking, like, yes, it's fun in terms of creating content and talking about things, because rumors are fun. Like we're lying if we don't say that rumors are fun, because they're fun to read, especially when our team's involved in a lot of them. But at the same time, don't run with those rumors too much. Try to be proper about them, like we're doing right now, like Keith and his entire crew on Friday did with Uncomfortable Conversations, like breaking things down and trying to get a proper understanding of rumors. Like that's all well and good. But if you really, really want to know about something, if it's real or not, it's Jeff Passan and it's Will Salmon. Jeff Passan, like you said, from the national level, Will Salmon from this team's level, because those are the only two. If they post something, I will run with it, because those are the only ones that don't worry about being first. Half the time, Jeff Passan isn't first, and even when everyone else is reporting, everyone will still say, "I'm going to wait for Passan. I'm going to wait for Passan," and then the Passan tweet comes out, and everyone's like, "Okay, now I believe it." That's when somebody has respect within the business and within the industry, because everyone else, John Heyman was first, Joel Sherman's got this, Mike the Barber's got this, like nobody cares.
Yeah.
Jeff Passan, did he post it yet? No, I'm going to hold off. I'm going to wait. And then once the bomb drops, once the Passan drum pops, then I'm ready to get excited. And then he'll tweet. I'll get the notification. Passan's got a tweet. Okay, now we're good to go. Now I believe it. Now it's a done deal because the man posted it. That's the way you should go about it.
And one last thing on the Alonzo versus Adames. I think G Money Stacks brings up a good point about the chemistry of this team. You bring in Juan Soto and re-sign Pete Alonso. I don't think that really jiggers the chemistry that this team has. Mm-hmm. But you bring in Soto, you bring in Adames, you're moving people around. I think that does tend to mess things up a little bit. I wouldn't want to mess with the chemistry this team has. And another thing is there will be a qualifying that Adames has the qualifying offer. So, the penalty right now for a competitive balanced taxpayer like the Mets signing a player who received the qualifying offer is losing its second and fifth highest selections in the following year's draft, as well as $1 million from its international pool. We're talking about, trying to sign guys like Roki Sasaki and other international players for the upcoming signing period. That was a part of the article as well. Wouldn't you just, because I feel like Adames and Pete's contract is going to be somewhat close to each other, more than, the outlier in Soto. Mm-hmm. Just sign Alonzo, and you don't have to worry about losing draft picks and losing international money and all that stuff. Alonzo is a pretty good first baseman to me. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's not like, a Gold Glove, but he could get pretty close to that when he's on. So, I just don't want to mess with what's going on here and how the Mets are going to structure this lineup and this team. And I don't think Stearns will. I think they're just checking in to me.
Yeah, it's not shocking that he's checking in because that's, this is the guy that traded for him, that, gave up a decent pitching prospect and that at the time of Drew Rasmussen to go over to the Rays, who was doing well for them until he got hurt. But then bringing back a Willy Adames who couldn't really find it or discover it while he was in Tampa, and then he goes to the Brewers and he becomes one of the better hitters in the game. So it's normal for a guy to check in and ask questions and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I have no problem checking in with the idea of that, but I'm with you. You don't want to rock the boat too much. And I think that Stearns, along with Mendoza, have the finger on the pulse of this team as to what works and what doesn't, and how much they want to change things of that nature. So no matter what, everything that we talk about, I said it on my show last week, no matter what happens, I trust David Stearns. I trust whatever he wants to do in terms of the build. And if if all the stuff we're talking about now, if he ends up ultimately saying, look, we're letting Pete go and we want Willy Adames, I'm like, would it hurt a little bit? Sure, because we've grown an admiration for Pete over the last handful of years, and it would be awkward to see him in another jersey, especially after the postseason that he just had and helping us in certain spots. But at the same time, I'd be like, okay, because I'm like you, like what you've been saying, and I've adopted it as well. And that's I'm rooting for the front of the jersey. I'm rooting for the Mets. I'm not. It's the names on the back or whatever. Like I want my team to win, and if this is what the president of baseball ops, who I put all my faith and trust in, believes that it's going to take in order to win, then I'm gonna run with it, because again, we're rooting for the name on the front, not the name on the back.
We got over 200 people in the room right now. Make sure you're subscribing till Mets
Like
do
and
us
sub.
part. Make sure you're following Ibby and Till Mets Do Us Part on X. Like this video, subscribe to Subway to Shea as well. Appreciate every single one of you in the chat right now. We got a little bit of Mets rumblings going on, and these are things that you also take with a grain of salt. We could talk about Corbin Burns, Garrett Crochet here, Devin Williams. Jim Bowden of MLB Network Radio said, David Stearns wants Corbin Burns. That is his #1 priority. These are things that you take with a grain of salt, especially, when you're looking at a guy like Jim Bowden, who has, obviously he's got that national level. He could, spit out all this information, but how much of it is true? Like you're 50-50 chance of being right or not. Now, Corbin Burns last season, 15-9, 2.92 ERA, had 181 strikeouts in 194 and a third innings pitch. He's got that relationship with David Stearns here. I know you weren't as interested as I was to sign Corbin Burns. I do tend to agree with you that a long-term deal with him is not the way to go. And that's something that I don't think that David Stearns is going to reach. We've seen it with starting pitchers, unless it's a out of this world type talent like a Yamamoto was, where he was willing to go to that 10, 12-year deal. I don't think this Corbin Burns is going to get something like that, or the Mets are going to reach when they have other options as well. You could talk about Sean Manaea. There's Blake Snells. I'm pretty sure there are people that are going to get less money than a Corbin Burns, but I would keep my tabs in on him.
No, of course, and like you said, the connections again, that's always going to be there because of the Brewers and everything. I don't know if Stearns was the one in charge when he had the brawl with Brewers management in terms of money. I don't know if that was him or not. I would have to double check on that.
Yes,
one.
I remember that now in spring training. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if that was Stearns or not. But either way, checking in is proper. But my problem with, not so much with Burns, but just like baseball people in general that put out predictions and things, it's just, I think there's a lot of laziness when it comes to it, because, I don't think you're going to see something like what happened with Garrett Cole for a pitcher moving forward. I really don't. Or someone's going to get that much years and that much money. And one can say, yeah, well, Yamamoto just got. I was like, yeah, but that's the outlier because he was 25 years old. This guy is not 25. He's 30 going on 31. There's a difference in age. There's a difference in wear and tear for an arm being over here. So I'm very hesitant when people are like, oh, he's definitely going to get 8 years, at least $200 million. I'm like, from who? Like, I want to know who's doing it, who's taking that risk, and why would they take the risk when other teams are showing that you don't have to go that high? Yes, you could say, well, look at Garrett Cole, and he's provided for the Yankees to this point. And I won't lie, he has given them everything to that point. But they're still on the hook for 5 more years or 4 more years at $144 million. So how are they going to feel towards it? I don't know. And they still haven't won yet either. So there are a lot of questions when it comes to a contract like that. And for me, I have my worries about Corbin Burnes when it comes to the dipping strikeout rate and the fact that, the numbers in general are strong, but when I see deteriorating things where it's what made him great, like the cutter has been his pitch and it's been deteriorating over the last 3 or 4 years. It's been going down. The strikeout rates are going down. People can say, oh, well, no, strikeout rate isn't everything. I'm like, I understand it's not everything, but this is also a strikeout-driven league. And if you strike guys out, it makes you a much better option as a pitcher. So if you've gone from 225 strikeouts to 200 strikeouts to 185 strikeouts, it's just like, well, what? That's not a trend that you want to see, especially when a guy's asking for 8 years. So it's like, if you're talking to me at like 5, I'm in. I'm all in, man. It could be Corbin Burnes at 5 years. But if he's going to push for 7, 8 years, I'm not even just the Mets. I'm curious as to who's actually going to give that money to him.
Right. And I think because of all the analytics now, this really does kind of screw over Scott Boras like it did last season. Teams are now hesitant to make these. Look at the like Duran Rivera, and you have said in the past to me, look at the K-9 ratio and how it is decreased to give someone that many years and that much money. The Boras, juice it is not as tough as it was before. I mean, he is not going to be able to get these monstrosity deals. He may be able to do it for Soto. And even to that point, people are going to say, well, what about his defense? And well, what about should we really be giving him that much money? There's only a certain amount of teams that are going to be able to go after this guy. And they're going to be like, you know what? Maybe I don't really have to spend this much money. Maybe I can get this deal to a lower rate. So those are definitely things to look out for, especially with a guy like Corbin Burnes. Now, I know we're in a crunch when it comes to time here. I'm going to lock in Garrett Crochet and Devin Williams together here. Garrett Crochet, there's been talks about a possible trade. Mets have been mentioned in this. He's only 25 years old. In 2024, he was 6-12 on that awful Chicago White Sox team, 3.58 ERA, 209 strikeouts, though, in 146 innings pitched. The White Sox GM, Chris Getz, said he wants position players in return, and the Mets have plenty of that when it comes to the minor leagues. The concern for him, for me, is his last 13 starts, he didn't get past the 4th inning in any of those starts. So from June on, he just could not get past it. And then Devin Williams, he's also a possible trade candidate from Jeff Passan. Last season, he only pitched in 21 2/3 innings because he had a stress fracture in his back, so he missed 4 months. The Mets need relievers, especially someone to go with Edwin Diaz. Who would you trade for? Would you trade for Devin Williams or would you trade for Crochet?
I think the easier answer is to say Williams because I don't think it's going to be that much of mental gymnastics to try and get him because he's on the 1 year with arbitration. Brewers probably want to get something for him. There's a reason why they pulled back that option because it's easier to trade someone going into an arbitration year and then being out the door as opposed to paying someone that option. So that's why they did that. So I expect him on a different team. So yes, it would be easier to attain a Devin Williams as opposed to how much you're going to have to give up for a Crochet. But I also understand why the Mets would want Garrett Crochet. It's a lefty. It's 25 years old. Like we just said, 25-year-olds don't hit the market, but you can find a 25-year-old when it comes to a trade. And my issue with a lot of Mets fans is you have to realize that if Stearns locks in and says, I'm going to get Garrett Crochet, there's a reason for that. Like I just said, 25 lefty. I think he got a K per 9 of 12. And like you said, his total strikeouts were impressive. Yes, the innings are a concern. And yes, I agree that it's worrisome when a player is so adamant about wanting a trade and then signing an extension. It's almost as if he knows he's on borrowed time before the arm pops. That's the way it kind of comes across to me as a fan. Could be wrong. Could just be a guy being smart and saying, look, I want to go somewhere. I want to lock in. I don't want to have to worry about contracts and arbitration and everything. I want to go somewhere and I want to just be able to pitch. It could be that too. Maybe I'm being too much of a cynic when it comes to stuff like that. But this is pitching that we are talking about, and it's always always a problem when it comes to Major League Baseball. But I understand the idea of wanting a Garrett Crochet, but Mets fans also have to understand this. If you're going to go after a Garrett Crochet, and I'm not even talking about adding in a Luis Robert, just Garrett Crochet. If you want a player like that, you have to understand it's going to cost capital. So when I saw, look, I don't like Bleacher Report. I don't. But when I see them put out that potential trade of like a 4-for-1 for Garrett Crochet, and it included Jet Williams and it included somebody else, it's like, well, you got to understand that's what it's going to take if you actually want to get the pitcher. And the reason I say that is because, look, we love our Mets. We could pump up our prospects all we want. We've been doing it for years, for our entire existence as fans. But I'm telling you right now, if the Olney and Passan podcast is proper in saying that the Red Sox are in on Garrett Crochet, the Red Sox have a much better farm system than the Mets, and they could offer less as opposed to the Mets offering more players and still get Garrett Crochet. If I'll put it this way, for any prospect fans out there that know systems, I will say this. If the Red Sox are only offering Marcelo Mayer as the front of their offer, then yes, the Mets have a shot to get him. If they're offering anyone of Kyle Teal, Roman Anthony, or Christian Campbell, the Red Sox are going to have Garrett Crochet. If the Orioles jumped in and said, we'll give you Sam Basayo or we'll give you Kobe Mayo, then he's going to be an Oriole. Like, those are just much better prospects than what the Mets can offer. Mets can offer quantity. I think these other teams can offer a much higher quality. It comes down to what the White Sox would want, and I think that's why the Mets would have to give up a lot more in order to even keep pace.
The good thing here is that, as we talked about all episode, the Mets just have so much options and ways they can go about putting together this roster if they want to, whether it's through sign, whether it's through trade, something that we didn't see in past iterations of this organization. So I'm excited to see how it comes down. Now, as we wrap up the show, latest news and happenings, qualifying offers extended to Alonzo, Manaya, and Sevy. I don't think any of them take it, but the only one that could possibly take it would be Sevy to me. Would you be okay if Sevy took the qualifying offer, which I think is a year, 21 mil?
21.
A little over?
A year, 21 and change. I would be fine with Sevy because I think this team's going to do other things to try and improve the pitching. So if you went out, signed a pitcher, traded for a pitcher, and Sevy took the qualifying offer as well, I'm well okay with that as the rotation moving forward. Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I liked what Sevy brought to the team. I think that, he's a New York guy at heart, and he loves to play here, so I wouldn't be upset. It'll actually just help out the rotation to go along with, David Peterson, Blackburn, Senga, and, whoever else they sign or trade for. Will Samuel of The Athletic posted that the Mets declined their team option on Phil Maton. That was expected, especially after the frustrating postseason he had. Could possibly return.
Could be back. Much cheaper. Cheaper.
Does the bad postseason really deter you from bringing him back? I don't think so for me.
No.
I think if you get him on a lesser deal, I think it's the way to go.
100%. I think that's why they declined it, and I don't think it's going to be a mad dash of people trying to sign Phil Maton, but I think you could get him back if you want him back at a much cheaper price.
Joey Lucchesi and DJ Stewart also becoming free agents this offseason. I really didn't want DJ Stewart back in the last year anyway. I thought that 2-month run for him was just a 2-month run, but now they had suffered those consequences of having to play. But at least it brought up, Mark Vientos into the fold as playing on this team, and JD Martinez for what they gave us as well. Joey Lucchesi, I wish we got a little more from him. I think anytime that they asked him to do something, when he came up to the major leagues, he gave us a good start. Probably wouldn't have lasted throughout the season, but I wish we could have saw a little bit more.
I agree. Everything that he gave to this team I think he was the highlight of 2023. He had the best start of all the pitchers in 2023. The Churv was a lot of fun, and obviously him providing innings in that last game with the Braves too. So it's thankful. Thank you for everything that you did for us. But most likely well wishes.
Yeah, Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor, congratulations to them. Silver Slugger finalists. Mm-hmm. And a couple of pitchers. I mentioned earlier that David Stearns was, in on getting depth. They got right-handed pitcher Kevin Hiegert off of waivers from Milwaukee, as well as signed Rico Garcia to a minor league deal. Hiegert was had in 9 innings pitched, and I'm sorry, in 11 and a third innings pitched. Let me get that correct. 9 strikeouts, 1.59 ERA. Born in Teaneck, New Jersey. He's a local guy. Like I said, another arm for depth. Enrico Garcia was 6-3 with a 3.94 ERA. Had 20 saves to lead the International League for AAA, for the AAA Washington team. And lastly, Tyrone Taylor underwent an umbilical hernia repair and right elbow loose body removal procedure. He'll be out for 2 months, but should be ready for the regular season. And I like him being that backup outfielder. I've always wanted a good backup outfielder. I think he does that, and he provides some clutch at bats as well.
Definitely. I'm very excited for Tyrone to come back and be a part of what most likely will be a platoon throughout the 25 season. And whoever that platoon is with, we'll find out. Hopefully it's Drew Gilbert, but we'll see if he can provide what is needed to stay up with the big club. We'll see what happens by the time spring training rolls around. But yeah, I definitely like Taylor being a part of that center field position.
All right, AB, before I let you go, let everyone know what else you're working on and what you got coming up, man.
Same old stuff as always. And as always, I want to say thank you so much for having me on the show. It is always a blast coming on the Subway to Shea podcast. Myself and my partner, John Saponaro, every Wednesday, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard here on YouTube, as well as X. Till Mets do us part. You can follow me right here at @poison_Ibby on X. That's where you'll see me the most. You can follow my partner as well at John Sap Talks over on X, as well as Instagram. And of course, follow the show handle at Till Mets Do Us Part. That's everywhere. That is on X. That is on Instagram. That is on TikTok. That is on YouTube. Give us a follow. Give us a like. Give us a sub. We're on our way to 1,000. We're trying to get there. We're at 860 right now, so hopefully we can crack that during this offseason. It is a goal, so we'll see what ends up happening there. But appreciate all of you that joined us today. Thank you so much. And as always, let's go Mets.
You can follow Subway to Shea on X, Instagram, and TikTok at Subway to Shea. You can follow me at Rivera86 and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. This should be up for audio later on in the day. And like and subscribe on YouTube. Thank you to all 200 of you, over 200, for being a part of this show. Appreciate you all. And always remember, let's go Mets.